I'm really glad you're here. Rejection. Rejection. Your body is rejecting your fetuses. And if we don't take them out right now, I don't think any of you are going to make it. And that was the start of motherhood. My boys, twins Mitch and Zach, were born 3 months early, weighing just over 1 pound each. They fit in the palm of my hand. I had a condition, ironically called HELP syndrome, that was causing my organs to shut down in reaction to the fetuses. No warning, no preparation. The first job that I had as a mother, I was a failure. The one thing that I could do, though, was to give them breast milk. They were too small to breastfeed, but if I was able to pump breast milk, they could take it through an NG tube and get some of that immunity that they had been born completely without. Patti, you need to start pumping your breast every 3 hours around the clock for at least 30 minutes each time. No matter where I was, when the alarm went off, that breast pump went on. I would fold laundry and pump a little milk. I'd chop carrots and wash dishes, and I pumped a little more milk. We would drive down Interstate 101 in the Bay Area heading to Stanford Hospital. I was driving in the carpool lane, and I had breast pumps on. Yeah, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley equity investors and the truck drivers alike all got a big look at me pumping breast milk. Turns out, I was pretty good at it. I was what's called a super producer. Like, I gold medaled in breast milk. Well, when the boys came home about 4 months later from the hospital, we had made the decision that we were going to move from San Francisco to Jacksonville, Florida. I was none too happy about this decision. You see, I had been born in the South, and I swore I was never moving back. But you know, sometimes those winds of change blow, and they blow you somewhere completely unexpected and maybe undesirable. Well, we knew that getting to the other side of the country, packing up all of our belongings was going to be easy. But how were we going to get thousands of bottles of frozen breast milk from one side of the country to the other? The answer? King salmon. You see, our neighbor, Uncle Dick, we called him, was a salmon fisherman. And he had this brilliant idea to use the styrofoam coolers that he would put whole king salmon in and ship around the world. Now, these are not little coolers that you use to take to your six-pack of beer to the Florida-Georgia game. These are big, honking coolers, 5 feet long, 2 feet wide, 2 feet deep. And in it, we nestled those thousands and thousands of bottles of frozen 4-ounce containers of breast milk in dry ice. Now, we were going to be shipping these in the cargo of the airplane. And by the airplane's rules, anytime you ship foodstuffs, it must be labeled as such. So on each one of these 15 coolers, it was labeled in big, black, bold letters, Patti Peeples breast milk. Consumption by authorized users only. So we're at the baggage claim in Jacksonville, and the coolers start coming off. Picking it up, stacking, one on top of the other, until we have the great wall of breast milk. Well, just as we take the last one off, I see a ruddy-faced, bearded, uniformed man poke his hole through that little hole where the bags come out. And then he parts those little fabric strips, and he puts them to the side, and then he gets up onto the conveyor belt on his hands and knees and rides it all the way around until he steps off right in front of me. He takes a long look at the great wall of breast milk, and then he takes a long look at my breast. He cracks a smile and says, "I just had to come meet the woman that made all that." "Honey, you must have the sweetest tits in the land." So Sweet Tits and family landed in Jacksonville with a bang. Now, we decided that we were going to live in Ponte Vedra Beach. And coming from San Francisco, I had no idea what Ponte Vedra Beach was like. So we set out to make it home. We parked our VW van in the driveway covered with Grateful Dead stickers. I put a fire pit right in the front yard, and we roasted hot dogs over it while I lay in the macrame hammock swing and strummed my guitar. I ripped out every one of those boxy shrubs that they put in front of every single stucco house in Ponte Vedra Beach, and I planted an enormous vegetable garden. I invited all the little kids to have their own little plot to farm their own vegetables. Well, it wasn't too long before I got the first of many phone calls from the Covenant Committee telling me to take down the tie-dye curtains that were hanging in the playroom window because it faced the street. She said, "Patti, don't you like plaid?" She then told me to rip out my vegetable garden and put back those boxy shrubs because, you know, Patti, your version of nature, it's not really Sawmill Lake's version of nature. I thought, well, maybe not, but mine's better. Am I right? So we struggled to make our way in this strange land of Ponte Vedra Beach. And I tried to find a tribe and build a community. And the journey was rocky, but I got to tell you, it was also glorious and so worth it. And I realized that when the winds of change do blow me somewhere unexpected or undesirable, the way I handle it is to try to shape those winds and to roll with it with my tribe rather than just being blown along passively alone. Now, where did I learn this? On the front porch of 242 Crite Street, Starkville, Mississippi. My mother, Patsy Peeples, Mama, as she's known to me and so many others, was a formidable lady. Well, she really wasn't ladylike in the least. She was unfiltered, even if her cigarettes weren't. She was a study in contrast. She would fish the ponds of Oktibbeha County every Saturday, and then she'd wear her pearls to church on Sunday. She wore her liberalism like a motherfucking cape in the red state of Mississippi. She could quote Faulkner as easily as she could the Fishing Channel. And she loved hard, just not another man after Daddy died at the young age of 39. You see, Daddy died suddenly, right at Christmas. And I was just 7 years old, and my brother, a new teenager, age 14. And there were still presents that were under the tree for Daddy, from him, and to him. And I tell you, this sudden death, it rocked our family for a couple of years. But eventually, Mother gathered herself, and she began to try to recreate what she thought was family. Well, by the time I was a teenager, I was angry and I was sullen, and I wanted nothing more than just a normal family. You know, a mom, a dad, a dog, and a cat. Well, normalcy was in really short supply in the Peeples household. And the adults that Mama brought into the family, they were entertaining, but they were not normal. Have you heard the quote in the South, "We don't hide our crazy, we put it on the front porch and give it a cocktail"? Well, at our house, the front porch was where life lessons were learned and family was made. I would come home from high school, and I would sit at the top of the driveway in my little yellow Dodge Colt, and I would have to screw up my courage that I knew I needed to get inside the house to change out of my clothes and put on my deli uniform so I could go sling sandwiches. But I would sit there knowing that I was going to have to run the 8-foot gauntlet of the screened-in front porch first, because there was going to be some weeping woman sitting on the porch swing, smoking a cigarette and telling Mama some tales of woe of the latest no-good man or financial disaster while she dispensed words of wisdom. I call these women that sat there on the porch women who cried. Now, it might be someone like Daisy. Daisy, she wore misfortune like a second skin. But I thought she was fabulous. She always had these beautifully manicured toenails that fit daintily in these little kitten-heeled shoes that they click-clacked when she walked. And the way she held her cigarette. It was like Audrey Hepburn. I hate smoking, but if I did, I'd want to smoke like Daisy. Now, Daisy, she taught me lessons that Mama wouldn't and shouldn't, like how to give a blowjob or how to be worldly. Now, Daisy wasn't necessarily the best one to teach about being worldly because it pretty much revolved around reading Time magazine. She'd say to me, "Patti Pooh, always carry a Time magazine in your purse, and if you see a man you like, you pull it out and pretend to read it. They'll think you're smart." Well, the day that I turned 18, I bought a one-way ticket to New York City, and I had $500 in my pocket and a Time magazine in my purse. Now, the other place, in addition to the porch, that lessons were learned and family was made was our kitchen table. Our kitchen table was nothing fancy. It was this old, unfinished, round oak piece of wood. The two halves were uneven, so the salt and pepper shaker would never stay upright. And if you moved your hands too quickly across it, you'd get splinters. This kitchen table was shoved in this long, narrow room. It was more like a hallway than a kitchen, right up next to this ancient gas stove that the front door would squeak when you opened it or closed it to the stove. I can still hear that sound. And on the other side of the table was a washer and a dryer, right in the kitchen. But what really stood out about this table, other than the fact that it always smelled of bacon grease and dryer sheets, what really stood out about this table was the fourth seat. It was always set with a plate, a glass, and a full set of silverware, just in case someone needed a bite to eat or a little place for respite. And most nights, there was someone there. It might be our cousin, Sheriff Dolph Bryan. Dolph was literally out of central casting for Smokey and the Bandit. He had this enormous belly that his brown police uniform strained at the buttons, and these big, furry black mutton chops that covered half of his face. Dolph would squawk at Mama over the police canner that sat on the dryer. Right on the main public channel, he'd say, "Miss Patsy, I'm getting a little hungry. You need to put the coffee on and save me a bite. I'll be over in about half an hour." Well, she did, and he did. Now, Dolph, by the way, was the same policeman that arrested Johnny Cash but for picking flowers in our neighbor's yard. Johnny got in the cups a little after a concert one night at the local university, and he meandered around and helped himself to flowers. Well, Johnny ended up in the slammer, more for the flower picking than from his public display of drunkenness in this dry town. And he wrote a song about it, Starkville City Jail. You ought to give it a listen. Well, a few years after Johnny died at a flower picking festival in Starkville, Dolph pardoned Johnny and returned the $36 that Johnny had paid in bail money when he gave it back to his daughter. Now, I probably could have used Dolph to help me out of the enormous number of fines that I was racking up in Ponte Vedra Beach. So we were making our way in Ponte Vedra, and I was finding my tribe and trying to live a more authentic life. And you know, sometimes things got just a little too authentic, though. When the boys were about 7, we had a mass exodus from the Cub Scouts. There was too many rules, too much homework, and not enough fun. So we said, forget that, and I formed our own outdoor adventure group for boys. We had no homework and one rule: be nice. We had so much fun. We built rafts out of downed tree limbs and had raft races in the retention ponds of the neighborhood. Covenant Committee loved that one too. We learned how to start a fire with a stick and a bow drill, and how to purify swamp water and make it drinkable. You want me around when the next hurricane rolls through. And we learned how to skin a raccoon. Yep. But you know, when you're a 7-year-old boy and curiosity meets opportunity, you just got to ride that where it takes you. So we were, with the adventure group, we're going to have a camping trip out at Hannah. And I had a carload of the 7-year-old boys, and we're driving along Roscoe Road. And one of them spies a freshly expired raccoon. Well, the car erupted with pleas, and I was game, so a few seconds later we pulled over. And I'm directing the boys to get the green Publix recycle bag to bring it over so we can scoop that raccoon up and take it to the campsite for a science class. Well, just as my son is leaning down to scoop the raccoon into the Publix bag, logic takes over. And I scream, "Stop! I gotta Google this shit." Instead, I called my brother. He's like Google, just funnier. I called him and I said, "Dabney, what are the risks of handling a dead raccoon?" "You gotta stay away from the brain. There's some kind of weird parasite in there." "Well, how do I skin it?" Wait, what? But truthfully, these kinds of exchanges are not that uncommon between Dabney and I. And after 1 or 2 seconds of pause, he launches into an incredibly detailed description, accurate too, of how to skin a raccoon. Well, long story short, at the campsite that night, we had a magnificent time exploring the insides of that raccoon, We stayed away from the brain, and we skinned it. And we finished up the evening with a ceremonial funeral march. All the kids decorated their bodies with charcoal from the fire, and they made spears out of sticks and wrapped them with Spanish moss. And we all marched with a raccoon in an old tent bag all around the campground for its final resting place, the dumpster. The parents that were chaperoning were back at the campsite that night, and they drank an awful lot in their tents put up by me. And I am sure that the phone lines were burning up the next day in Ponte Vedra Beach. But talk about a bonding experience. That group of about 20 kids, siblings, and parents became my tribe, my children's extended family. Many are in the audience tonight. Shout out. And it dawned on me that maybe that's what Mama had in mind after Daddy died. So tonight, I give thanks to all of my teachers and guides, even the porch women who cried. Most of my teachers were not invited. Some were. And tonight, I give thanks to a woman, Mama, who I pushed away for her entire existence on this earth. But like Mama, I always have an extra seat at my kitchen table if you need a bite or a respite. And now that I live in Springfield, I have a place for you on my porch. And I hope you'll stop by and we'll tell another story. I'll hold the crazy, but the cocktails are plentiful. Thank you.